All right, let's focus on Iran right now. The rogue regime of the Islamic Republic promises to keep on enriching uranium, a clear violation of the terms set forth in the Iran nuclear deal signed by the Obama administration and other nations. Well, today at an event for Citizens United for Israel, Vice President Mike Pence promised that the U.S. would not give in to Iran's nuclear threats.
We hope for the best, but the United States of America and our military are prepared to protect our interests and protect our personnel and our citizens in the region. And under President Donald Trump, America will never allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon.
Also, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made his announcement at the conference via satellite from Jerusalem.
We should stand up to Iran's aggression now, and Europe should back the sanctions instituted by President Trump. We certainly do. It's so important that President Trump decided boldly to leave this bad deal. He decided to restore sanctions, and Israel is deeply grateful for that, because this is vital for Israel's security, for the security of the region, for the security of the United States, for the security of the world.
Now, besides the U.S. and other JCPOA signatories in Europe, they are speaking out against Iran's latest threat, but not quite as firmly as you heard from Vice President Mike Pence or Benjamin Netanyahu there. France firmly urged Iran to, quote, stop all activities non-compliant with its commitments to the nuclear agreement. The UK said that they remain fully committed, but called on Iran to, quote, immediately stop and reverse all activities inconsistent with its obligations. And Germany says they want to preserve the deal, but, quote, the ball is in Iran's court. Joining me now for more on this is the Senate chairman for the National Iranian Congress, Amir Fakhrivar, who has been jailed in Iran for speaking out against the regime. Also with us, president of the Center for Security Policy and former National Security Council Chief of Staff, Fred Fleitz. All right, Fred, first to you. Late last week, we had Alan Dershowitz on with us to talk about Iran, and he told us, quite frankly, that Israel will never allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon, no matter the cost. Here is Professor Dershowitz.
No prime minister of Israel will permit a containment policy toward a nuclear Iran. In other words, all right, you get the nuclear arsenal and we'll deter you. It just won't happen. Israel, with or without the United States, will destroy the Iranian nuclear reactor before it becomes hot if it believes through its own intelligence that it's on the verge of developing a nuclear arsenal.
Now, Fred, isn't this the real Iran nuclear deal, the one that matters? If they do get a nuke or even get close, Israel will do something to prevent it. This is the coalition that matters most, right? The one with Israel and the United States.
I think that's right, but we shouldn't be overreacting to this increase in uranium enrichment by Iran. It really represents a negligible increase in the threat, given that the threat is already very high since the nuclear deal allows Iran to enrich uranium. No presidential candidates are running around right now saying that, Democratic presidential candidate. President Trump forced Iran to start enriching or resume its nuclear program. The Obama administration let Iran continue to enrich and gave it the capability to blackmail the West if it ever was dissatisfied with the results of this deal. There has to be another deal that means no enrichment.
Right. And the only reason we're hearing about this, Fred, is because of the sanctions in place on Iran that are hurting the regime there and hurting public opinion in Iran as well. Now, the Trump administration, of course, they're vowing that maximum pressure on the regime. But Iran says they are fully prepared to enrich uranium at any level and at any amount. And so who's going to give in here first? I want to cite something from an article in Politico I read today. Quote, the Iranians may also be betting that Trump, who has shown little appetite for war, will fold first, lifting sanctions in exchange for talks. Fred, it seems like a very bad bet.
Well, look, Iran is trying to use this threat of violence and this threat to increase enrichment to force the Trump administration to drop its tough policies and to get Europe to force its companies to trade with Iran despite U.S. sanctions. Look, President Trump is not going to give in to this blackmail. And what people don't realize is that the Europeans, their patience with the Iranians is running out. They don't like ships being mined in the Persian Gulf. They don't like the fact that Iran sent assassination squads into Europe last year, which forced Europe to sanction Iran. I think that President Trump has a winning policy.
Right. The ball is really in Europe's court, despite what we heard from so many of them there. All right, Amir, here's President Trump yesterday when he was asked about Iran's latest threat to raise these enriched uranium levels.
Iran better be careful, because you enrich for one reason, and I won't tell you what that reason is, but it's no good. They better be
Amir, I read an article that was quoting some people on the streets of Tehran, and they are more concerned about the ongoing effects of these sanctions than they are about the possibility of military action against Iran by the U.S. How long until we see another green revolution in the streets of Tehran? How long before people in Iran really start pushing for regime change?
John, let me first say I agree with Fred when he said regime never stopped enriching uranium because President Obama let them continue that path. And let's say Iranian people, they never stopped their protest against the regime. Since December 2017, when the new round of protests was started, we do have every day all over the country the protest against the regime. And the regime is trying to just crack down badly to make sure nobody will hear about that. But the case is, regime right now is hurt badly. Why? Because look at the numbers. 85 to 90% of Iran's economy is based on selling oil. They have been producing or exporting oil 2.2 million barrels a day. Think about that, 2.2 million. And right now it's 180,000. It's just oil for food program unofficially. They don't have any money. They could pay salary to Revolutionary Guard ambassadors. They could support the terrorist groups all around the world. They could just go and buy some European allies with these petrodollars. They could continue their nuclear program with these petrodollars. Right now, they lost it all. They don't have any money. They are acting aggressively because they don't have any other choice
Amir,
right now.
We know, you know, Fred knows, I know that there is no real good option for Iran here in the end. So we all believe that they're going to be the first one to blink. So how will we know when they're ready to sit back down at the negotiating table?
You know, the question is, what do we want from them at the negotiation table? One point is very important is this regime must go. It should be the policy. If they wanted to keep it as unofficial policy, it's okay. 2 weeks ago, John, I was on your show, exactly the same show, when we were talking about this threat. I said, I'm hoping President Trump and U.S. administration, they are not going to the trap of regime to go for limited military strike. Exactly a couple of hours after that show, we have seen Iran hit the U.S. drone with the Russian missiles, and then Iran have been waiting. They are begging for military attack for the
They're trying to provoke the United States into some sort of military attack.
President Trump was smart enough to not go to that trap. It's good. If we want to go for something, we should have the policy of regime change in place. What
do you think about this, Fred? The policy of regime change. Why would the regime sit down and negotiate if we're advocating for regime change? I mean, I think, you know, the Iranian people want a new regime change, but should this be part of the negotiations to stop the Iranians?
That's not President Trump's policy. The president also does not want to attack Iran. We're not talking about a regime change. The president has many options ahead of him, I might add, before we attack. And there's too many Republicans right now saying, well, let's just start blowing up their nuclear facilities. The problem is their facilities are mostly underground. There's covert facilities we don't know about, and doing that would set off a huge war. President Trump has many, many options before we get to that point, and I'm sort of encouraging my Republican colleagues to stop talking about launching an attack as the first option. That should be the absolute last option.
Right. Anybody who's seen a topographical map of Iran knows the challenges involved in a bombing campaign. There's literally a wall, 4,000-foot wall around the entire country that has to be thought of in any attack. Amir, what do you think is the best option for the United States at this point?
I think honestly, we have to stay the course. Our policy right now is putting huge pressure on Iran. It's denying funds it would spend on its troops in Syria, on terrorism, on its missile and nuclear program. We can't let these stunts, like slightly increasing in uranium enrichment and mining ships, to deter us. And we have to work with the Europeans. I think they're coming our way because of Iran's belligerent activities.
They don't have much. It doesn't seem like they have much of a choice, Fred. Same question for Amir. Amir, last word to you.
Look, John, it's next week we are going to have a conference called Constitutional Revolution versus War at the United States Congress. Congressman Dan Crenshaw is going to sponsor that conference. In that conference, we are going to just give the suggestion, the third option to President Trump. It's not just negotiation to keep the regime in place or war. We have the other option. It's the constitutional revolution. I'm suggesting President Trump should support the constitutional movement and to put pressure on Iranian regime to change the entire constitution, because Revolutionary Guard, Iranian Guard, based on this constitution, can go and export the revolution and do the terrorist activities all around the world. And based on this constitution, we have a dictator called Ali Khamenei in place in Iran, which is using Iranian petrodollars. Iran is a rich country, but he's using all the money to just hurt the war.
Amir, we'll have you back, and Fred, we'll love to have you back too to talk more about this. We'll keep our eye on what comes, and President Trump will stay the course in the maximum pressure campaign because we know it is working. Amir, Fred Flight's great to see you guys. All right, coming up.